Good afternoon, everyone. So, artificial intelligence is present in our world and is powering our economy, our workforce, and our lives. And so, today I am here to present on our Virginia AI for K-12 state initiative and the relevance of artificial intelligence, both for us as individuals as well within our educational space. So again, a little bit about me. Yes, I am Keisha, Tennessee. I am serving as the VDOE Computer Science Coordinator. Again, I would like to say thank you to everyone who is attending today, as well a thank you to the Science Museum for hosting these lunch series. I look forward to attending some upcoming lunch series and be on the other side of the screen as well. And I am again delighted to be here to discuss a little bit about artificial intelligence, as well as artificial intelligence in the education space. All right, so often I like to start a presentation discussing the why, yet today I thought it would be important to discuss the what. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, there's no formalized definition of artificial intelligence because it is a multidisciplinary endeavor. So artificial intelligence oftentimes includes a number of integral elements, such as computational methods, robotics engineering, with that sensory and perception component, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, and so forth. Now, AI systems, which will often be referred throughout the presentations, are commonly described as intelligent agents that are used within the world to deliberate and produce outcomes that affect the world. So there isn't a agreed upon definition because artificial intelligence is rather broad, yet there is a general understanding of what artificial intelligence is. So I have a short video that I would like to play, but this video I think does a great point of highlighting both the understanding of what artificial is and intelligence is, and getting us to the purpose and the intent behind leveraging human capabilities with technology. All right, so in the video, it's going to highlight that yes, artificial in itself by definition are items that are deemed to be not real. Whereas intelligence, we are basing that off of our human capabilities. So again, when we think about artificial intelligence, it's not really about the movies and where it has that sci-fi approach where robots are coming in to take over society and no longer will there be human beings. Yet it's about human beings utilizing technology to get the technology to more so replicate the things that we do as human beings. And one may say, well, if it's to replicate what we may be doing, are there some concerns with that? Well, there are some general concerns with artificial intelligence, which could be that, one, how much can you program something to really replicate the human innate interactions, the ability to pick up on context clues and things of that nature, as well as how do you transition from taking something that's replicating perhaps our own biases by our own internal design, as well as biases that can be presented in data. So understanding those limitations is some of the big concerns that there are out there with artificial intelligence.
What is artificial intelligence? Before we answer that, let's look at these terms individually. What do you understand by the term artificial? Well, it can be anything that is made by humans, things that are non-natural. And what do you understand by intelligence? It is the ability to understand, think, and learn. So what do we get when we combine these two together? Artificial intelligence is a broad area of computer science that makes machines seem like they have human intelligence. The goal of AI is to mimic the human brain and create systems that can function intelligently and independently. They say that the age of AI is here, but then you might be wondering, why don't you see flying cars or robotic maids bringing you lunch? Why doesn't your life look more like the Jetsons? Well, for starters, that's a cartoon, and when it comes to AI, a robot is nothing more than a shell concealing what's actually used to power the technology. AI can manifest itself in many different ways. If you have ever asked Alexa to order your food or browse Netflix movie suggestions, you are actually interacting with AI without realizing it. And that's kind of the point. AI is designed so you do not realize that there is a machine calling the shots. In the near future, AI is expected to become a little less artificial and a lot more intelligent. As AI becomes more intelligent, it will obviously take on the role of an intelligent worker. While most of the repetitive and largely time-oriented tasks can be automated using AI, we will still need human experts who can build and maintain these synthetic bots and work on the strategic and creative aspects of a job. So in conclusion, AI is a boon that can help optimize any job. This means that, as always, it's not AI versus humans. Rather, it is a combination of humans and AI versus the actual problem statement. So what are you waiting for? Pull up your socks and get ready to be a part of this AI revolution. Start learning this trending technology using Edureka's expertly curated courses. Until next time, happy learning!
So now that we've gone over sort of what artificial intelligence is, let's take a moment and think about, well, what are the everyday uses of artificial intelligence? And three common approaches that we look at when we look at artificial intelligence includes like self-driving cars. Like that's something that often comes to mind. We think about content recommendations, right? So whether it's Netflix or whether it's music recommendations, marketing, advertisements, those recommendations, those are things that all come up when we think about AI. So again, self-driving cars, content recommendation, image and video processing as well. So when we think about using our phones and face detection, right, with Face ID, or filtering, right, face recognition, and being able to layer on multiple images to our faces. These are artificial intelligence technologies that we do utilize within society every day, very commonly. Some other things to think about is think about your mail in your inbox. The art of being able to identify something that could be deemed as spam mail or even promotions or things of that nature is leveraging the elements of artificial intelligence. And when we think about artificial intelligence and demystifying the sci-fi robot taking over, you can start to look at artificial intelligence perhaps as a way to allow human beings the opportunity to leverage more roles that are creative in design, right? And so that maybe we design things that can automize things that are more repetitive tasks and something that we could utilize our skills and our talents elsewhere, as well as artificial intelligence has been helpful within our workforce and leverage, say, in the military or in the police agencies to assist with dangerous tasks and things of that nature that could save the lives of the human being that once was doing those tasks. So we just discussed like, hey, where's artificial intelligence for us today? Well, it's important to note, well, where did this all begin? What are the origins of artificial intelligence? So I included this slide for us to really think. It's 2021, and artificial intelligence, or the concept per se, a lot of the documentation dates its origin around 1950s. And during that time, you have Alan Turing, who wrote in his notable writing, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence. So he explored the mathematical possibility of artificial intelligence, as well as the logic theorists, right? So they developed more so a proof of concept, a program that was used to mimic human problem-solving skills, in which they presented that at the Artificial Intelligence Conference. Now, again, that was all in 1950s. So what led to artificial intelligence that we have today? Well, there's three key things that have contributed to the exponential growth of artificial intelligence that we know it today. And that includes the improvement in speed and availability of processing chips, right? So processing chips within our computers have allowed a widely available processing chip so that now computers are really a part of everyday use. So whether it's the processing chips in your cars or within your smartphones or in your devices, it's more readily available, right? There's more computers in use by more people, and then the abundance of data. So again, one of those elements of artificial intelligence is that machine learning, is deep learning, and that relies heavily on making inferences, determining patterns, identifying patterns, all based upon data. And we have an abundance of data now. So that has also contributed to the growth. And when we think about the data, we also have to think about, well, how do we get the machines to actually make decisions off of data? And that goes with the increased use of algorithms and that algorithm design and improvement. We oftentimes hear sometimes even about these algorithms, which one of the concerns with artificial intelligence is the transparency, right? So Google may have an algorithm to do this, other platforms have an algorithm to do that. And we're not sure what that algorithm is, but there is an algorithm, right? And so these evolvements of algorithm designs, as well as the abundance of data and the improvement in processing chips and availability, have all contributed to what we have with artificial intelligence today. So now that we look again at what it is, the growth of artificial intelligence, the relevance and the impact, it's important to know from our lens at the VDOE, like, why are we invested in artificial intelligence in the educational space? So why is this the right time to be teaching AI in K-12? Well, really simple. The primary purpose with education is preparing students for optimal success. So that optimal success relates to as being informed citizens, right? And having an understanding of perhaps even public policy decisions and implication of societal use of AI, as well as preparing students for the world beyond the K-12 space, so post-secondary endeavors. And the impact and prevalence of AI, of course, impacts our workforce. So there will be a shift in employment needs. There'll be a shift in other concepts and skills that are needed. So it's important for us to look up and say, what will students need to know to be prepared for the future, for the things that we know are upcoming and the things that we don't know, but providing them that foundation of where we're going. Now, that is the general. Why is it important? So let's take a look at the national initiative. So Virginia is one of the many states that's participating in the national initiative. And I would be remiss if I did not include a slide just to highlight the immense work that they are doing. So the AI for K-12 initiative is a joint project of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence and the Computer Science Teacher Association, and through the funding of the National Science Foundation. And it was sparked because in 2018, based upon analysis and review of the Computer Science Teacher Association K-12 standards. So those standards are not necessarily standards that states use to an entirety, but I can tell you the VDOE has utilized those standards in framing our 2017 computer science standards. And because those standards didn't go too much in depth about artificial intelligence from really K through 10th, there's a few standards that dealt with artificial intelligence in 11 through 12. They partnered together to look at ways to launch this national initiative. And as I mentioned, this initiative, they have the 5 big ideas. So when they're saying, hey, what is important for AI education for students? So we looked at it holistically. How do we interact? But what are the concepts behind AI that we would really like students to understand? And so they have the big 5 ideas. And here's an infographic of the big 5 ideas. You can grab yourself a free copy on AI4K12.org. It's also been translated into 14 different languages. So that just shows the breadth of this initiative and the widespread scope. Because one thing to also understand is that there's other countries that already have AI education plans, such as in the European Union or China. So it's something that is a worldwide understanding and value of that transition of this emerging technology. So again, Virginia is one of the many states that is participating in the initiative. And during the summer of 2021, the Virginia AI for K-12 team developed this vision statement. And I would read the vision statement exactly as stated here, which says, we believe in AI education because we are living in an age where technology is extending and enhancing learning. Students should be offered the chance to develop AI skills and competencies, to understand and develop complex AI systems, and promote system level thinking. AI education in Virginia would drive a more equitable society for all learners, including minorities, girls, and low income youth, while opening doors to advanced teaching, learning, and career opportunities for all. And with the state, our primary goal is to inform all of our stakeholders of the value and the prevalence of AI education, as well as to provide our educators with resources and tools related to AI so that they can encourage and explore AI technologies within their classroom. With this goal, we are leading a number of efforts to share out what AI is and why it is important and what skill sets students can learn by understanding the elements of artificial intelligence. It includes speaking at events such as today. We are also presenting at VISTI next month, both for more of a teacher audience with tech tools and demonstrations of these tech tools of how they can leverage them in their classroom. Now it's time to look at, well, what are the concepts that we're looking to engage educators and students in our community about AI? So again, here are the big 5 ideals. The remaining of the presentation is going to take a little deeper look into these 5 ideals. So big ideal number 1 is perception. Big ideal number 2 is representation and reasoning. Big ideal number 3 is learning. Big ideal number 4 is natural interaction. And big ideal number 5 is societal impact. All right, so big ideal number 1. So as indicated earlier, AI systems are commonly described as intellect agents that perceive the world, perform computation, and produce outputs that affect the world. So computers perceive the world using sensors. So we addressed that big ideal number 1 is perception, and perception requires more than just sensing. It includes the extraction of information from a signal received by the sensor. And this in itself requires a high level understanding of that domain. So we look at those examples there. It's, well, what is it that we need to know to understand those examples, such as the self-driving car, digital cameras, auto tagging, those uses of AI? Well, again, understanding that perception requires a high level understanding of the domain to interpret the sensor data, understanding facial expression, right? So we're thinking about the domains like, well, what's the domain? Facial expression recognition requires the understanding of the facial constructs of one's face, right? Speech recognition relies on the extensive knowledge about vocabulary, grammar, semantics. Without having a deep understanding of that domain knowledge, of that area of focus, you won't produce reliable results. So now let's take a look at big ideal number 2. And again, if you have questions throughout, please be sure to add them in the chat. Big ideal number 2, right? All intelligent agents maintain a representation model of the world in which they're operating. So when a computer plays tic-tac-toe or chess, it creates this representation model of that board. And they utilize that representation model to keep track of every move to determine the next move while they're playing. So that's why an example here is like a game playing agent that's provided, right? They're using the representation of the board, the model of the board. And I know this is often seen, say in your science class, you're creating modules and maps for representations, or in mathematics. And you also see this in self-driving cars, using representation and models of the road to determine the optimal driving path that someone should take, right, while in there. Or think about an airline scheduling agent, right? It's using representation of the airline, of how many seats to sell, how many flights should be offered. All of those things are used then with optimization algorithms to make sure that the best solution is derived. So again, Big idea number 2 is the development of representation and reasoning, also that we can apply algorithms to that. Now, big idea number 3, learning. So computers learn from data. And so again, that's a lot of that machine learning and that deep learning concept. So machine learning allows computers to create the representation models and algorithms by analyzing training data. So there's different degrees of data that's in there. You have elements of like supervised and unsupervised learning, deep neural networks, computational elements of abstraction, encapsulation, pattern recognition, decomposition, all of that through the abundance of big data, right? So we're learning and shifting through big data. And so we think about, well, what is it that we would like students to understand and know? And so that includes that machine learning is critically dependent on the selection of the training data. And so that initial training data within itself is very key because that is like the prototype. And there could be biases within that data. And those biases are not necessarily only unique to, say, the developer, but it could be systematic elements that contribute to the data that is presented. And more of the data is more reflective of, say, societal decisions and choices, and not necessarily to anyone individually or any groups individually. And so without really being open and understanding and recognizing that, you know, that initial set of data could give false positives to what you're trying to get as your outcome, right? And so educating students about that is going to be relatively important. And also understanding that having large amounts of data set is going to require a large amount of computing power to even handle that. And so having an understanding of the elements of computing and how computers actually process things is also a big component with learning. Just the elements of computers and within itself is going to be valuable. And students understanding that data comes from many, many forms, and providing different data sets are going to be critical and giving you outcomes that you need. Now, I should add that these big 5 ideas are strands that are used to cluster areas of focus within AI. And we're looking for, at the Department of Ed and our AI for K-12 state team, to look at some of these correlations that's already, again, within the computer science standards. And so there's already a strand of data and analysis within the computer science standard. And it's making sure that we tie these things in here so that we can hone the skill sets that we've already put in place so our students can be prepared for the future in the life ahead of them. So now let's go to big idea number 4, natural interactions. And this is the big idea that I really have a great touch point to, because intelligent agents require many types of knowledge to interact naturally with humans, right? There's a lot of rich context that we have with as individuals with one another that artificial intelligence isn't there yet. It's a little bit more difficult to replicate. And that's where a lot of the growth within artificial intelligence is to play. But yet, let's think about the common day use of, say, a chat box, right? The intent of a chat box is for you to not know if it's a chat box on the other side. And if you're unsure, a chat box, to think about if you go to a website and something pops up on your screen, or you have a question and it's like, how may I help you? And you type something in and you pose your question to it and it responds back, right? The essence of the chat box is a conversational agent, right? It's designed to replicate the conversation you would have, say, with a live customer service representative, yet in a more straightforward, direct, easy access, right? No longer waiting on hold or hearing that elevator music. It's like, hey, I'm here on this website, and now we're immediately responding, right? Because technology has driven the desire for that immediate result. And the key to artificial intelligence as we see it today is that we are kind of unaware if it's artificial, right? Like it truly represents the human intellectual ability that if we're interacting with the chat box, we think for a moment, was that a person or was that a chat box? And so those are the things that we're thinking about when we look at the natural interaction and what we would like students to understand. And some other things when we look at for students to leverage is that AI is sometimes perhaps better than human reasoning in certain areas, certain games, certain combinations, evaluations. And you could see AI being a little bit better with processing, say, processing or shifting through big data, right? And identifying patterns maybe more quickly than, say, a human being. But again, that ability of context clues, the ability to infer based upon other understandings such as cultural awareness, geographical things, that is something why humans will always be a component of this, and it will never be something of AI takes over our own ability. And so now we're at big idea number 5, right? So societal impact. This idea embeds throughout everything. And I think throughout any standard, any level of education, everything has a societal impact. And artificial intelligence, as with anything, can impact society in both a positive and in a negative way. And as I expressed earlier, especially when you think about the data that's being collected and being used and the algorithms that are being placed with that data, there is that level of transparency and fairness that have concerns with artificial intelligence. There's also that concern of, well, how do you introduce such a, more people may say, as a deep concept in the educational space? And I would say a lot of that is by having everyone understand the applications that are already utilizing AI, and having people understand that personalization is also based upon the data that you're releasing, and having an understanding of policies that even relates to data and the use of that data or those algorithms, and being able to discern between them. Having an awareness in your community of, where is AI being used? Is AI being used in our classrooms, in other systems of our society? And I would say even in the classroom, some of the learning platforms, right, they're using artificial intelligence technologies in the background to provide that personalized approach to say those questions and those responses. There's great tools and resources for students to engage with. There's like a Google Quick Draw, right, where students are able to draw something sort of like charades, right? It's really a game of charades, but seeing if the computer could figure it out before a human being. And I think that would be a great little challenge for you. Have a test group and, a control group of individuals working on a game of charades, along with using something like Google's Quick Draw and seeing who wins, right? Again, just referenced before, AI sometimes can be better leveraged and make more use of some of our own capabilities and abilities, more so than ourselves. And that could be a challenge or an activity that's used even as early as kindergarten. And you get students to do that. And you can also get them to look into, well, how did the computer understand that my stick was going to be a tree? Well, that's because they have millions and millions of data that they're collecting every time you draw. So even then, you're giving up some data that's building into their database that allows that algorithm to learn more and more and more each and every single time. And so I just encourage all of us to understand that artificial intelligence is here. It's not like in the movies per se. There are some good everyday common uses. There are some uses that have sparked a lot of concern, press release, whether it's self-driving cars, whether it's surveillance and things of that nature, but it's not going anywhere. So it's important for us to ensure that we are educating ourselves and students about this emerging technology, to better prepare them for the world ahead. So that concludes my overview of artificial intelligence, why it's important within the education space. And now that leaves us for, I believe, some room for Q&A.
Okay, so I'm not seeing anything popping up in the chat, so we'll go ahead and bring it to a close. Thanks very much, Ms. Keisha Tennessee, for joining us today and helping us discover more about our world and how AI is going to impact it. So next week, there will be no lunch break science. Please join us on Wednesday, December the 1st at noon for Roving on the Moon and Mars. That's going to be presented by Dr. Yahaira Sierra Sastre. She's an engineering project manager at NASA Glenn Research Center. So you can register for that talk at smv.org. Each talk is free to attend and is open to the first 300 registrants. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you again, Ms. Keisha Tennessee, for joining us. Until next week, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you all for joining us today.